an hour, so that is about 5 minutes per year, I think, isn't it? So we'll do what we can. Now, first of all, Gerald Gardner, who we put the plaque up to today, when he came to live in Highcliffe, he was a retired colonial gentleman, of which, as I suspect, there'll be several hundred living in the Bournemouth, Christchurch area. He came from a fairly well-off family who were involved with, from Liverpool, involved in timber importing. And he spent his life out east in Ceylon, Borneo and Malaya, working in tea and rubber planting and latterly as a government inspector. And he retired at the age of 52 to London because his wife wanted to come back. She didn't like tropics very much, so they came back to London. And they were there for getting on for 2 years. And everyone knew, so we got into 1938 now, everyone knew the war was coming. And Gerald was rather concerned both about his collection of weapons which he had accumulated over the years, and also concerned about the safety of his wife. I think in that order. And so they decided to come to somewhere a bit more rural. And why they chose Highcliffe, I still don't really know. He says that they knew somebody in the area. I suspect I know who that person is, but I don't know yet. I'm still investigating. But anyway, they came down. Gerald stayed in a naturist club in Christchurch, Mudderford, while he was looking for a house, and he found Southridge, which most of you have been to today. It was bigger than the garden that we have, that Fred has at the moment, because the adjoining plot, where there's a newer house, that was originally part of the garden of Southridge in Gerald's time, so it was quite a nice big space. Those of you who've seen it will know that it's a detached house, brick built, built in 1923 by two sisters who, after some 14 years or so, decided they wanted to sell it. And this suited Gerald quite well because it was fairly secluded, the garden, that he could indulge in his naturist activities. And so he bought the house. He also added a sun lounge, again probably for sunbathing activities, and also a dark room in the attic, where he would probably have been able to develop photographs that you couldn't readily send to the local chemist. So anyway, there we have it. We've got a description. I met a lady in Highcliffe who remembers visiting Gerald during the war, and she was a young girl at the time, and she says this: "The house struck me as being rather sombre and dark, with beautiful dark stained wood panelling, and he had the most beautiful hall, and on the stairway it had a suit of armour. I was always expecting the flap to go up and a face to appear. And up on the wall he had these beautiful daggers, spears and pistols, which I think were all in firing order. It was a very interesting house. Upstairs in his library there were 3 tables with books out everywhere, and he said, 'Any book you want to borrow, just take it.' He had a lot of history books. He was able to talk to me as an ordinary person. I wasn't spoken to as if I was a child and not understand what he was talking about." Now, Gerald retired, active, he used to go on long cycle rambles. And in the course of one of those, he found this theatre which had just been opened, and foundation stone having been laid in March 1938, and it been completed by July that year. And it was a Rosicrucian church, the first Rosicrucian theatre in England. Rosicrucians were esoteric, they're part of the Western esoteric tradition, roots in Gnosticism and Kabbalism. It started in 17th century Germany, and it had links with Freemasonry and had classic esoteric beliefs such as reincarnation. This particular branch of the Rosicrucians was called the Crotona Fellowship, after the residents of Pythagoras, who was a vegetarian and also very keen on reincarnation. This land in Christchurch was donated to the Crotona Fellowship, and they built, first of all, a wooden hut, which they called the ashrama, where they had their teaching sessions, and also this theatre. Now, Gerald was always interested in esoteric things, various other things. So I thought, oh, the Rosicrucians, yeah, I'll go to that. Oh, they've got a theatrical performance on, a play about Pythagoras. So he and Donna, his wife, went along. Donna didn't like it at all because she was a very experienced amateur actress, and these performances were really rather terrible. And the theatre actually didn't last very long. It closed after a few months, and became a succession of other things, including an aeronautical workshop and various things like that. And it burnt down in the 1960s, I think. Anyway, Gerald continued to go to these meetings, and he says this, I'll quote because it's in his interest. He said, "Now at meetings, Gardner had noticed a group of people apart from the rest. They seemed rather browbeaten by the others, kept themselves to themselves. They were the most interesting element, however. Unlike many of the others, they had to earn their livings, were cheerful and optimistic, and had a real interest in the occult. They had carefully read many books on the subject, unlike the general mass, who were supposed to have read all but seemed to know nothing." These people that Gerald got to know, I think he's exaggerating this being put upon by the rest of the theatre group, but anyway, he got to know them really well, and he said, "I would go through hell and high water even then for any of them." You know, he really found, you know, same, invited to their houses, and the day came when one said, "I have seen you before. Gardner interested asked where, in a former life." And all gathered around and agreed that this was so. So someone said, "You belonged to us in the past, why don't you come back to us?" He felt sure they had some secret. So, a few days after the war had started, he was taken to a big house in the neighbourhood. This belonged to old Dorothy, a lady of note in the district county and very well to do. This was the mill house that a lot of us saw today as we walked past. Dorothy wasn't involved, I hasten to add, but it was in this house that he was initiated into witchcraft. And there are certain details given which I won't go into, but they are fairly well known, I think. He said the word Wicca, which they used, hit me like a thunderbolt, and I knew where I was and that the old religion still existed. And so I found myself in the circle, and there took the usual oath of secrecy, which bound me not to reveal certain things. It was, I think, the most wonderful night of my life. In true witch fashion, we had a dance afterwards and kept it up until dawn. So, this was important. What he wanted